Okay, hello, welcome to this video on the Comprehensive Prescribed Fire Management Plan from the Central Pine Barrens Commission. And this is, they have a whole bunch of links about this, and we're going to read some of this to you, and we're also going to look at the PDF as well. So, the Central Pine Barrens Prescribed Fire Management Program is an interagency collaborative program focused on the safe and effective use of prescribed fire as a vital management tool within the Central Pine Barrens to help ensure public safety and ecological health. As the Central Pine Barrens is a fire-prone and fire-dependent ecosystem, prescribed fire is the most important and effective management tool to help mitigate wildfires while improving this globally valued and locally distinct ecosystem. The need for the development and implementation of a sustained prescribed fire management program was first identified nearly 25 years ago in the Central Pine Barrens Comprehensive Land Use Plan and by the Wildfire Task Force in its Fire Management Plan, following the wildfires that torched thousands of acres of forest in Rocky Point and West Hampton. More recently, the arrival in the region of the southern pine beetle has been a swift and striking indicator identifying the critical need for prescribed fire and ecosystem management in the Central Pine Barrens. This small but mighty forest pest has caused significant and substantial loss of pitch pines from forests and urban areas since its detection in 2014. Additionally, tick density and abundance are very high in the forests of the Pine Barrens, leading to high exposure and health risks for those who visit and recreate in the area. Prescribed fire can help reduce the tick populations and related tick-borne disease exposure, providing another important benefit to human health and safety. In 2018, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation allocated $1.25 million to the Central Pine Barrens Commission, which facilitated the creation of this interagency prescribed fire program for the region. As a result, the commission is facilitating the implementation of the program, working alongside local communities, fire departments, private and public landowners, and state and federal organizations to bring an effective and safe program to the Pine Barrens and its residents. So, prescribed fire improves the safety of communities located near or within woodlands by reducing the intensity of potential wildfires and improving the abilities of firefighters to safely access and extinguish wildfires. This public safety improvement is accomplished as the prescribed fire consumes fuels in the understory and then removes the overgrowth of shrubs and high-density small trees. This process breaks up the availability and continuity of fuels, reducing the potential for wildfire spread and increases in intensity. Prescribed fire also creates more space among and between existing trees, which improves the ability to access the forest to address any potential wildfires that ignite. Using prescribed fire to mitigate the risk of wildfire is an effective and encouraged tactic identified within the Central Pine Barrens Commission Land Use Plan, as it is a tool successfully implemented, often used and widely supported by numerous agencies and landowners around the country and around the world. In addition to reducing wildfire risk, the cumulative results of prescribed burning include many ecological benefits by facilitating a shifting mosaic of habitat types and successional stages on the Central Pine Barrens landscape. Properly implemented prescribed fire management strengthens ecosystem resistance and resiliency to pest, disease, and fluctuations in weather and climate, increases the native species diversity and abundance, ensures suitable and native improved habitat for wildlife, including rare and endangered flora and fauna, and retains species-specific fire adaptations, and improves and safeguards the ecosystem services, especially the filtration and recharge of water to Long Island's aquifer system, which provides 100% of Long Island's drinking water. So, this is the plan. We went over this plan already, so we have the PDF now that we're going to look at, which is here. And this is the Central Pine Barrens Comprehensive Prescribed Prescribed Fire Management Plan, prepared in January 2021. All right? So I'm not going to read every single thing of it, but we're going to look at some of the information here that we have. All right? And there are some figures and some information here in this chart here. All right? So The executive summary: the Central Pine Barrens is a globally rare and culturally rich and fire-dependent ecosystem that continues to experience declines in ecosystem health and increased wildfire risk caused by the lack of fire disturbance. The two predominant factors associated with these alarming yet manageable ecological impairments include the continued development of the wildland-urban interface and failure to implement management as a means to mitigate the loss of this disturbance regimen while counteracting other anthropogenic ecosystem stressors. The recent arrival and decimation of pitch pines by the southern pine beetle serves as just one example that typifies declines in forest health that are currently being experienced in the Central Pine Barrens. The risk and loss of homes and businesses that occurred during the 1995 Sunrise Fire and the more recent 2012 Crescent Bow fires reinforces that this system is fire prone with a high wildlife urban interface. All right, that's what WUI stands for. The comprehensive prescribed fire management plan aims to provide the foundational framework to catalyze a sustained and scientifically based, landscape-focused, and collaborative management program within the Central Pine Barrens using prescribed fire as a primary and justified management tool. The cumulative goal of prescribed burning is a shifting... Now, we already read some of this already in the other one, so I'm not going to go over everything here. But the final sections of the plan detail monitoring and research, which is fundamental in order to facilitate an adaptive prescribed fire program. All right, so public education and outreach. The last section of this plan is prior to conclusion is recognized as crucially necessary for this plan to succeed and for prescribed fire to develop widespread acceptance as the public have little exposure to or familiarity with any kind of prescribed fire and or forestry management practice, at least here on Long Island. I mean, in New Jersey they do. Let's go. So this is an introduction basically about the Pine Barrens here. So it says here, the Central Pine Barrens is a disturbance-dependent ecosystem located centrally in Suffolk County, New York, that supports a high diversity of rare and endangered flora, fauna, and ecological communities and lies adjacent to and within one of the largest human populations in the country. It also provides filtration and percolation services for a large quantity of high-quality water to recharge the region's sole source aquifer and sustains a rich cultural history and a diversity of recreational opportunities. To protect this globally rare and ecologically significant and culturally valuable ecosystem and its services, the Long Island Pine Barrens Preservation Act was enacted in 1993 by New York State. The action effectively established land use protections while authorizing and assigning responsibility for protection of this significant resource to the Central Pine Barrens Joint Planning and Policy Commission. Okay, so the commission is facilitated. We already read that already. Actually, we do want to read this because it talks about the issues that face the Pine Barrens. So, the Commission is facilitating a collaborative and adaptive prescribed fire program, including planning, implementation, and monitoring for the purposes of specifically improving ecosystem health as authorized by the Central Pine Barrens Comprehensive Land Use Plan. Furthermore, as a fire-prone ecosystem with significant wildland-urban interface, mitigating the risk of wildfire on public lands and increasing public safety in communities adjacent to woodlands are at the forefront of this prescribed fire program. Okay, so I'm not going to go over everything because this is a big thing here, right? So it is widely recognized that a variety of driving forces and modifying disturbances are responsible for creating and maintaining the Central Pine Barrens ecological structure and function, including but not limited to high-frequency, low-intensity fires, low-frequency, high-intensity fires, severe weather events, historic timber harvesting, and forest pest infestations. Fire, both prior to and post-European settlement, is one of the most formative disturbance regimes in the Central Pine Barrens and includes both naturally ignited and human-caused large fires that were known to burn across the Long Island landscape. However, this critical disturbance regime has been contemporarily lost from the landscape due to human influence in several ways. A leading cause is due to a culture of fire suppression that was initiated in the 19th century within the region following massive wildfire outbreaks. The legacy of fire suppression continues to occur in the region due to mass development of the wildland-urban interface within the Central Pine Barrens. Suppression was and is for good reason, but it should be recognized that suppression also removes the critical element of fire disturbance that assists in the maintenance of healthy forests and ecosystems. Additionally, while the Central Pine Barrens have been protected from development and its boundaries protected, active ecosystem management, including adaptively managed disturbance implementation, has been stifled by the culture of preservation, hands-off management that has accompanied these protection measures. Land use protections and fire suppression practices that were initiated to protect the ecosystem and public health have instead resulted in a paradox: the facilitation of increased fuels, increased fire intensity, increased wildfire risk, coupled with overall declines in ecosystem health and diversity. Furthermore, our human infrastructure, transportation corridors, and land use have fragmented much of the Central Pine Barrens. And again, I'll just add here that, again, this is more of an issue on Long Island than in New Jersey. And that makes it even more of a challenge here. Fragmentation interferes with the free movement of fire that was present from both naturally caused and aboriginal ignited fires during long past centuries. Urbanization and fire suppression have confined and reduced these natural and cultural fires to minimal acres, calling for the need to substitute their disturbance effects with prescribed fires on the landscape. The application of fire in this landscape under carefully prescribed conditions and in carefully selected locations is a component of good ecosystem management and stewardship. The Central Pine Barrens geologically falls in the center of the range of the Atlantic Coastal Pine Barrens ecoregion, a zone of similar habitat. The adjacent states and agencies with jurisdiction and management oversight of these Pine Barrens habitats have been using prescribed fire as a management tool for decades. It is urgently time for the Central Pine Barrens to benefit from best land management practices implementation like neighboring areas of the range for this globally rare and significant habitat type. Additionally, other Pine Barrens type habitats in the state, like the Albany pine bush, have also an active prescribed fire management program that is heavily implemented in a highly urbanized environment. Properly stewarding this resource effectively requires adaptive, science-based, and justified and adapted land management practices that have already been successfully exemplified in the surrounding states, i.e. New Jersey, and other areas with Pine Barrens habitat. The Central Pine Barrens is really the last example of this type of habitat and ecosystem that is not being actively managed with prescribed fire, and that lack of management has led to continuing declines in health of the ecosystem and the species that reside here, gradually deteriorating the ecosystem services provisions that the citizenry relies on, while steadily increasing the risk to human health and property from increasing wildfire risk. It is for these reasons that reintroducing prescribed fire management is particularly important and timely, as declines in Central Pine Barrens health and increased potential for severe and intense wildfires are evident. For example, the forests are even aged, overstocked, and declining. Fuels have built up on the forest floor, and ladder fuels have developed that can transport fire to the canopy. Canopies have closed, shading out early successional species and increasing development of organic matter, which is driving transitions from post-historically xeric systems to mesic. These trends make the forest very susceptible to fire, pests, and even collapse. The Crescent Bow 2012 and the Sunrise 1995 fires exemplify this high risk for wildfire and the impacts of the wildland-urban interface. The arrival and rapid decimation of pitch pine, that's Pinus rugosa, the tree of the Pine Barrens, caused by southern pine beetle, is another striking indicator of degraded forest health and susceptibility to pest and disease, which has brought the need for ecosystem management to the forefront. A chronic and equally alarming indicator of declines in the Central Pine Barrens health is the increase in threatened and endangered species listings, many of which are dependent on fire, early successional habitats, and particular host species. To counter these trajectories, the Commission is proactively coordinating and implementing adaptive prescribed fire management as a surrogate for historic fire disturbance by mimicking both natural and historical cultural fire ignitions that have shaped and sustained this unique fire-adapted ecosystem through time. The cumulative goal of prescribed burning is a shifting mosaic of habitat types and successional stages on the central Pine Barrens landscape in an effort to strengthen ecosystem resiliency to pests and disease, increase native species diversity, ensure suitable habitat for rare and endangered flora and fauna, retain species-specific fire adaptations, reduce the risk of wildfire within public lands, and increase public safety in communities adjacent to the woodlands of this fire-dependent and regionally valued ecosystem. More specifically, the following ecological, social, and cultural aspects form the desired objective and outcomes of prescribed fire. All right, so to reduce accumulations of wildland fire fuel that increases the threat of wildfires, to restore and maintain the forests, grasslands, and wetlands of the Central Pine Barrens, to improve and sustain the Central Pine Barrens capacity for ecosystem service provision, to restore and maintain habitats that support compatible outdoor recreational uses such as hiking, hunting, equestrian activities, and bird watching, to aid in the training of community fire department personnel and other stakeholders in order to increase firefighter safety and expand strategic and tactical suppression options through more frequent exposure to wildland fires, to provide educational opportunities about wildland and prescribed fire by specifically conveying how fire has a natural role on the landscape. So, let's see. So we're going to talk a little more about the background here, ecological and historical background here. The Central Pine Barrens, as defined by the Long Island Pine Barrens Protection Act of 1993, is located in central Suffolk County, Long Island, New York, and encompasses 106,000 acres. The Central Pine Barrens area is one system of the Greater Atlantic Coastal Pine Barrens Level 3 ecoregion defined by the EPA. This ecoregion includes substantial and similar ecosystems within New Jersey, eastern Long Island, southeastern Massachusetts, Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, and Nantucket. The prevalence of this ecoregion is primarily driven by historic fire disturbance coupled with edaphic soil conditions that are predominantly coarse, sandy glacial till and outwater soils within the northern Atlantic coastal zone. There are other instances of Pine Barrens community within the region that exist due to local soil or other abiotic factors in those areas, whether on ridgetops, wind-blown prehistoric lake sand deposits, or other formation allowing pines to remain a competitive dominance. Some examples of this include the Albany pine bush, the Rome sand plains, Montague plains, and the Shorgunk mountain ledges. So here's a map here of all the Pine Barrens. This is our Central Pine Barrens here. Here's the Pine Barrens in New Jersey, and also the Pine Barrens in Cape Cod. All right. So this basically talks about the geology of it, where it has a lot of interesting maps here, the elevations. So you can see we have a lot of hills on Long Island. You can see here a lot of morainal hills that were formed here, and you have the rivers that go through here. So this is a map of the area here. And again, EPCAL lies within this region. All right, so that's exactly why the Pine Barrens Commission must step in and prohibit any development there. All right, and maybe, like I said, take it from the town. It needs to be a preserve, bottom line. And that means no drag racing either. All right, so they talk about the hydrology here. They talk about the soils. Here's a map. So talking about the various sub areas of the Pine Barrens here. I'll be here for hours if I read the whole thing. I talk about the Pine Barrens here, the climate here in the Pine Barrens. So Long Island Central Pine Barrens area have a temperate maritime climate characterized by being humid and mild. Temperatures in the Central Pine Barrens are buffered and made more consistent throughout the year by the coastal maritime influence of the Long Island Sound, the Atlantic Ocean, and the islands surrounding embayments, including Great South Bay, Mauritius Bay, Shinnecock Bay, and the Peconic Bay system. That's what keeps Long Island cooler than New Jersey, by the way. All right. So talk about the rainfall here. We talk about a little history here, archaeology. Fire towers. We used to have fire towers on Long Island. We don't anymore, unfortunately. They still do exist in New Jersey. And these are the types of Pine Barrens that you have within the Pine Barrens. So there's different subtypes, all right? So the ecological community descriptions are directly referenced from the 2014 Ecological Communities of New York, second edition, or edited update. So this basically talks about all the different kinds here, right? So you have the pitch pine oak forest, which is a mixed forest that typically occurs on well-drained sandy soils. All right, the dominant trees are pitch pine, mixed with one or two of the following oaks: scarlet oak, white oak, red oak, and black oak. All right, the relative proportion of pines and oaks are quite variable within this type. All right, then we have the pitch pine oak heath woodland. So the pitch pine oak heath woodland community is a pine barren community that occurs on well-drained and fertile sandy soils in eastern Long Island. The structure of this community is intermediate between shrub savanna and woodland. Pitch pine and white oak are the most abundant trees, and these form an open canopy with a 30 to 60% cover. All right, so you have all the different ones. Then you have the coastal oak heath forest, all right? Then you have the pitch pine scrub oak barrens. The pitch pine scrub oak barrens are a shrub savanna community located. So these are all the basically different types of sub-communities within the pine barrens. You have some that are more desert-like than others. You know, you have some that are mixed in with grasslands. You know, and you have the dwarf pine plains, of course. Dwarf pine plains is a globally rare woodland community dominated by stunted individuals of pitch pine. So they're dwarfed. We've been there. We've been to the dwarf pines. You know, it's extremely desert-like. And it's definitely one of my favorite areas, too. So you have a lot of different ecosystems here. And so we've been through here. So there's a lot of information in here. A lot of charts. About maintenance of a forest, the weather, all different kinds of stuff here to look at here. And like I said, I can't go over the whole thing. It talks about climate, large fire history, also correlated with periods of drought. So, of course, the weather plays a big role in that as well. All right. And these are the largest fires in the Pine Barrens, believe it or not, that have occurred. One of the largest was the Winship. This happened in 1930, and it burned 3,827 acres. B&L into Brookhaven State Park. So you had a number of fires. You had the Sunrise Fire in 95. Rocky Point were pretty large as well up there as well. Crescent Bow. Compared to New Jersey's fires, these are pretty tiny. Again, that's a part of the reason why New Jersey is healthier. All right. So it talks about when the most spring and April and May are the most frequent months for large fires to occur, but they are also months when the KBDIs are low. So large fires that burn under low KBDI conditions would occur on days with brisk winds, low moisture, and in fine and medium surface fuels. So applying this information, it can be concluded that prescribed burning in April and May would be most favorable for burns where the goal is to reduce fine and medium surface fuel to top kill shrubs that are transitioning. So that's summer. They talk about all different seasons here. June, July, and August are months that can be very dry, and KBDIs usually reach their highest annual levels. Fire severity generally increases. The Sunrise Fire of August 95 was a perfect example for that. In June, July, and August, burns with jackpots of dead and brown heavy fuels could be burned with high levels of consumption. Now, New Jersey usually does their burns in late winter and early spring. So fall weather and fire history indicate both that in September and October, KBDIs plummet and large fires are rare. These months provide the opportunity to burn oak-dominated forests by taking advantage of fresh leaf drop and burning over damp soils. These would be low-severity burns with a focus on fuel load reduction being the goal. As most plant food reserves are now in the roots, tree mortality would be minimal from burns. This is also a time to experiment with burning of pitch pine oak forests that have not been mechanically thinned. So it's talking about basically the forest that the oaks are trying to shade out the pines in. All right, so winter, there are no records of large fires occurring during the winter months in the past 90 years, so it can be concluded that the winter fire has not contributed to fire ecology of the Pine Barrens. During the winter, there is very little fire danger risk. Winter can be a good time of the year for first entry burns into untreated shrubbery fuels to help prepare those sites for future burns at more ecologically beneficial times of the year. So it talks about the fuel loads, the pine communities, the amount of acres. So it says the largest section is pitch pine forest and pitch pine heath woodland, then pitch pine oak forest, then the dwarf pines, then the pitch pine tree oak scrub woodland, and then successional pitch pine and successional pitch pine oak forests. Pine-dominated forests. For the purpose of Fuel's description, the pine forest communities are narrowed to 5 forest types: the pitch pine forest, the pitch pine heath woodland, pitch pine oak forest, dwarf pines, and forest oak scrub and pineland account for the majority of pine fuel types. There's a lot of scientific stuff in here. Here's a map, again, of the areas here. The dwarf pine plains are in red, all right? So there's a lot of information in here as to how they're going to do this. Dwarf pines obviously have more fires than the mature pitch pine forests. It's a very arid ecosystem. Talking about the grassland communities, which we have at EPCAL. This is a map of some of them. You can see there's EPCAL in yellow. You have the wetland communities. These occur along the rivers, generally. And you can see here, here's some more information here. Wetlands within Wertheim. So, and they talk about alternatives to prescribed fire, combining strategies, legal considerations, planning and intimate collaborative landscape management, pre- and post-treatment plans, landscape burn plans. So they're going to talk about basically different plans in here. There's a lot of information. This is a long document to read. But you get the idea that we also need fire break trails. New Jersey has those, and they put a lot of those in. A lot of ours have been overgrown. They need to be recut. This is some of the fire management units. So they're going to have Brookhaven, Rocky Point, Manorville, Calverton, Dwarf Pines, and Southampton. All right. Talking about the number of acres in each here. Here's a map. All right, so hardwood mentality. And this is talking about, I guess, the areas that have been hardest hit by southern pine beetle, I guess. It looks like here that you can see that Flanders was hit hard, as we know. Areas around Calverton have been hit hard. Southern pine beetle. In 2014, southern pine beetle was found for the first time on Long Island within Connecticut State Park, Wertheim National Wildlife Refuge, and Hampton Bays. The outbreak and its spread have been and continues to be significantly impactful, resulting in mass loss of pitch pine within many of these public lands. Cut and leave suppression has been a successful management practice, which has resulted in a reduction in frequency of size of southern pine beetle outbreaks. The initial and continued decimation remains within the forest, with mass dead standing and suppressed pines within certain areas of the region. So this is some of the demographics of the areas that are in the Pine Barrens here. Land ownership. Fire districts. It's Rocky Point here, again on the map of Rocky Point. There's a whole bunch of maps and information in here. Fuels. So this is very, very comprehensive, and there's a lot of information here. And these are the areas I think that they've burned so far. Very little, as you can see here. And they've mainly been grassland burns. They haven't been woodland burns. All right. So these are the projects now that are in here. So these areas here that are shaded, I guess, are project areas where they're going to be doing some burns, which is good. So the eastern part here, the south side a little bit. All right, so you get some idea here. Brookhaven. So I'm going to go over all the different areas here and the plans in each of them. All right. So these are the plans in each of them here, right? All right, the areas in bright pink, that's the lab. All right, some of these are owned by the county. Some of them are state parks. So some of them are town. Talking about all the different preserves here. Fire districts. Here's your risk rating in this area here. So there's a lot of information here. You could just pause the video and look at it. And, best off just to read the thing. This This is a lot of information on here, and I've got to say I'm pretty happy that they've done this study. And let's hope we can start getting prescribed burning. The sooner we get this done, the sooner we can restore the health of the Pine Barrens, because I don't want to have to go to New Jersey to go to the Pine Barrens. They're also talking about this area here, EPCAL. This is exactly why it needs to be preserved. All right. Different areas here. So many different areas here that they're talking about here. About restoration of the health of our Pine Barrens. All right, so here's Otis Pike, and I think these areas that are, this is a prescribed fire, so this is where they've already done prescribed fires in these areas here, right at Otis Pike. All right, here's Peconic Headwaters. They're doing some more prescribed burns over here too. Most of these are grassland ones, and that's the problem. You need to go and you need to focus on the other areas here. There's the dwarf pines. So this is the dwarf pine plains here, a map of that. That's all in red. This is a map of when the fires happened in the dwarf pines. So it looks like they do have a zone here where they're going to do some fire enhancements here. Because there will need to be controlled burns there too to some extent. Here's Flanders, the Southampton area, and this is an area talking about the beetles here. So they're talking about basically this area. There was oak mortality also present here as well, and they're talking about the Hubbard, Sears Bellows, and Munns Pond, as well as Henry Hollows. And then there's mass dead and standing down trees that have been occurred by the swiftly moving roundless beetle in the East Quogue area. So this area has been hit very hard. Numerous pitch pines have been lost from these forests, which will become oak dominant. So we have to intervene unfortunately, there is no plan for that particular FMU. So you can see here all the maps and all the information that's available here. All right, talking about the Sarnoff prescribed plan stuff. So these are some of the areas that are. So you can read the whole thing here. They're talking basically about all. This is a very good report, and I just wanted to, I've been going over a half an hour now, so I don't usually make videos this long, but read the whole thing. It's going to take a while, but some people don't understand how important it is to have fire in the Pine Barrens. All you have to do is look at New Jersey and how much healthier their Pine Barrens are because they have properly managed their forests. Now it is time for Long Island to get on the same page as New Jersey, and this is very encouraging. And hopefully we can do this and get this going because time, I don't want to have to go to New Jersey to go hike on the Pine Barrens, but if we don't do anything to restore the proper fire balance in our Pine Barrens, we will all have to go to New Jersey to see pines, which is certainly going to suck. And if it comes to that day, then you might as well have to live there. I don't want to live there. So that's going to be it for this video. Take care, and thanks for watching.